Hi, everyone. Welcome to AHT's Continuing the Conversation. My name is Candice Crystal. I'm the artistic director over here at AHT, and I have with me a lovely panel of guests today. So I'm going to actually have each of them introduce themselves, and we'll start with Amber.
Hi, my name is Amber Robinson. I'm the Senior Vice President for the American History Theater. I'm also an Army veteran. I served 10 years in the Army and I was public affairs, which that's like photojournalist and public relations kind of together. That's me.
Thanks, Amber. All right, and we'll have next up Hal.
Hello, I'm Hal Berry. I'm the president of the American History Theater. At 17 years of age, I joined the United States Navy, and that's how I found out about San Diego. Had never been to California, wanted to come, and always thought I would come back, and now I've retired here.
Love it. Thanks, Hal. And next we'll have Spachel.
Hello, my name is Michelle. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. My story is similar. I served in Okinawa, Japan, ended up back here in San Diego where I still reside and serve in other ways, which is under a nonprofit called Jewish Family Service, breaking down barriers program where my role is to reduce mental health stigma and discrimination for underserved communities.
Thanks, Michelle. And then Chris, last but certainly not least.
No problem. I'm Chris Wood. I'm a U.S. Army veteran, 8 years, right out of high school, and a military brat all through the years, and also a board member of AHT.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here virtually as we do this. So, each one of the people you're seeing on your screen have some sort of affiliation with AHT. As you heard, Amber and Hal both work here, as well as Chris on our board. And Spachel has actually been featured in one of our Continuing the Conversations discussions before. So, super exciting stuff today. And before we jump right in, it is Veterans Appreciation Month, and we just want to thank all of our veterans. This cause is very near and dear to all of our hearts, myself included. I have not served, but my father was a Marine, and for that I am grateful. And that has always been like a really I love that about my dad. So that was a cool thing for me growing up as a military brat, and I always wanted to follow in his footsteps. And it's like I'm going to be an actor. It's fine. So fun times. But we're going to go ahead and jump right in and talk a little bit about the issues facing some of our veterans. So I'm going to go ahead and start off on this discussion of the Army's new basic training guidelines, this kinder, gentler approach to training. So I actually want to kick this one over to Hal first. Hal, what is your take on all of that?
You want me to refer to just the training part? Well, I was in the Navy, and of course, the Navy was we always joked that across the fence, because we were down at Liberty Station, at what used to be the training center, and the Marine was right next door. And on a certain area, you could actually go up to the fence and you could see these Marines. I mean, they were working 7 days a week. It didn't matter the day, the time, they were working. And at least in boot camp, even the Navy, we got Sunday off. Worked 6 days a week, but not seven. Uh, when we get into the discussion of racial discrimination, I'll really have more to say. But for me, it was a transformative event in my life. It was the transformative event. I always say I came out here as a 17-year-old teenager, and I left the Navy as an adult male. It really transformed me. I loved the Navy, but it did not mean that the Navy and the military didn't have serious issues that we'll be addressing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Spachel, you were in the military more recently. Can you talk a little bit about your take on this new approach with this kinder, gentler training?
Oh yeah, so I the trainings are a little bit different. I'm more familiar with the Marine Corps basic training, which involved 3 months. I will say that Mothers of America did make our trainings kinder too, so we can relate to the Army and the different ways in which I recall that there is changes with training. I know that I believe that the reason why they're doing it is because there is such an emphasis on mental health, and that's my specialty, and I know that I would say that maybe this is their way of trying to mitigate some of the impacts that many of us end up dealing with when we do make it through basic training and we do end up serving our country. And there's only so many people in this nation that can even qualify, let alone make it past even basic. And so I'd say that they're doing their best to make it to where there's not individuals getting out, having to retire medically because of mental health conditions, or having to get out because of PTSD, because of depression and the impacts of that, and how it affects even the families of military individuals. And so lightening the load is a tactic of which I'm not sure how effective it's going to be. I guess only time will tell.
Mhm.
But because in the Marines we have sayings such as pain is weakness leaving the body and things
Right.
like that. And so it will be interesting to see how the Army handles this new implementation and training, and if it's something that's going to trickle across the board to other branches.
Totally. Thank you for that. And Chris and Amber, I see you both are shaking your heads in agreement with everything that's being said. So let me throw it to Chris first. Chris, what's your take, particularly being a former Army and all of that, and these new guidelines? Do you feel like this is something that will be beneficial or not?
Well, back in the day when I went, I was, raised around the military, so I was used to the ins and outs of the lifestyle. But when I went to basic training, it was a shock. Okay, I mean, it was total, like, exactly what they did: the yelling in the face, the cattle truck, and but I was prepared for it. But it definitely did toughen me up,
Mhm.
and I saw a lot of and I gravitated towards the individuals that weren't as tough, so I helped them through it. And that helped me, and that helped them grow also. So I don't know, as far as growth as an individual, what the new programs are going to do.
Mhm.
We might not see that. Sometimes people react better with stress, but when you remove that stress, how are these individuals going to react? In present day situations. So it is going to be, looked at, and just hopefully we have positive results and we have longevity,
Mhm.
uh, in the military, because it is, some of us don't make it past 8 years,
Right.
to a career. And I guess maybe softening it in the beginning will extend it,
Mhm.
where probably what I experienced in the beginning shortened my career. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that's a reasonable question to ask for some, because I know it was like 4 years is what I heard was like the common, everybody did 4, and then if you felt like staying in or if you had the perks or whatever, you stuck around. So, um, I would love to see how this changes, and I do hope they keep statistics on what changes happen. And certainly not my final one on this one. Amber, let me, go ahead and throw it to you on that. I know these new guidelines, and we've talked quite a bit, just kind of off camera, about being a woman in the military. What's your take on these new guidelines?
I think that I think that it's going to be good. First and foremost, I've read up on it a little bit, and what they are going to be one of the things they're going to be eliminating is that kind of drill sergeant shark attack. And I know you guys were probably, when you got off the bus, like you had your rucksack on, or your duffel on, and you get off the bus and all of a sudden you're swarmed by drill sergeants, and they're yelling and screaming and making you do push-ups with your duffel on, and some people are getting injured like right off the bat. you
Right.
know and I read one quote from an infantry drill instructor, and he said, he felt that that shark attack right off the bat, it undermined the trust that needs to be between a recruit and a drill sergeant. Right off the bat, you're afraid of them. Right off the bat, there's someone that you fear, and so they're hoping to eliminate that so that there's more of a bond of trust, and hopefully instruction can take And I know that at times that was an issue for me. I was, wanting to take in the instruction, but I'm being screamed at and then being made to do push-ups and having to help other people. And, it's very confusing. And so the information that I really needed to be getting into my brain, it just wasn't happening. It was a little bit too, but they want for it to kind of simulate combat. I know that, they want it to kind of, simulate the chaos of combat. So it definitely does that. I can attest. It just kind of, and it really gears you up to when you do get to combat, it gears you up for those moments where you have to face that. And it's just like Chris said, it also kind of forces you to help your buddies, because they would say, "Help your buddy, what's going on? He's dropping his duffel. Well, what are you going to do?" And so it did kind of force us all to kind of bond together as recruits.
Yeah.
So there's going to be pros and cons, and we'll just have to wait and see.
Agreed, agreed. And I do want to say that I enjoy watching these changes that are happening in real time and people recognizing like our mental health is so, so important. And I think that's one thing that we got the opportunity to do when we discussed the continuing the conversation series. And with breaking down barriers coming on board, we talk a lot about these marginalized communities and how sometimes these situations can affect them differently. So I definitely want to use that as our segue to discuss kind of racism within the military as a whole, and anyone's personal experiences, what you all witnessed. I've learned a lot through hearsay and reading and movies and shows, and I don't know what's the truth of it, what's not true about it. And Hal, you are probably the biggest advocate I have ever seen for loving your organization and your branch of the military, but also being comfortable with saying, what I experienced here or what someone else experienced was wrong. So I'd love if you would just talk a little bit about anything you witnessed, policies you've seen that maybe were changed to help kind of be more inclusive.
Well, before I lead into the story, I was a hospital corpsman. And the thing that I noticed in my 3 years as a hospital corpsman was a total insensitivity toward gay rights,
Mhm.
a total insensitivity toward women in the military, and race in the Navy. At that time, the Navy and the Marine Corps were considered the worst services for discrimination against people of color, much less all the other things. Now, the story is that I experienced racism firsthand in a very violent way in boot camp, in that I had already experienced racism twice in civilian life when I played American Legion baseball and then on my senior trip when we went down south. But when I got in the Navy, the company was 60 individuals in a barracks. Uh, all militaries did this. They may still do it. Once in a while, a military will go into a big city and say, "We're going to get a whole bunch of you to join, and we promise you that you can all stay together in boot camp." So I got in a company. There were 60 of us. 30 of us were just from wherever. The other 30 were all from Texas.
Mhm.
We had one young man who was an African American who was amongst us 30 from everywhere. And within a couple of weeks, because I only stayed with that unit 3.5 weeks and I had to get out. And I'll end my story with that. But after about a week and a half, it was clear that the Texans were running the barracks. And those of us, myself being one of them, who would speak, I didn't have a bunk near this young man, but I would talk to him and just, like you do, he just, "How's it going?" Blah, 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 blah. And I had about 3 of the Texans pull me aside in the afternoon and say, I won't use the word, "What the are you doing talking to that?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean? He's just in the barracks. What else are we supposed to do? We're supposed to talk to our co-sailors." And they said, "Well, you don't talk to him anymore." And then one guy, as he left, he said, "And we're going to be watching you." Then what happened, and we heard about it when it happened because it wasn't any forecast. In the middle of the night, about 10 or 12 of them, they had a committee, I guess. They decided in the middle of the night And all of us other whites were sitting there frightened to death because you see, they've intimidated the whites not to stand up for the young American, the African American. And they went and they gave him what was called back then a pillow party. They took their pillows and with force put pillows all over him and then literally beat him with their fists. The assumption of the pillow party, even though as a corpsman, I never asked a doctor if that was accurate, if it can really hide the bruises, et cetera, et cetera. And then they went back to their bunks. And the young man, of course, had to go to the clinic the next day when the drill instructor saw him. And the Navy basically did nothing. Now, they did punish us as a group. We were out and we had to do like 3 hours of this kind of stuff, but they didn't do anything on the racial end. And that is when, and to end my story here, that's when I, this very naive, idealistic kid from the Midwest who only weighed 165 pounds, realized if there's any way I want to get out of here. And I happened to see a sign that said, we're looking for people to be in the Drum and Bugle Corps. I played the drums. And I went and I talked to the chief who was in charge. And he said, fine, but you have to understand you have an extra 4 weeks of boot camp. Because of all your duties, you're not able to go to classes like the rest of the boots. So I wound up 12 weeks of boot camp simply because I had made a decision that I felt threatened physically because of the racism against this one young man. And there's a tag to the end of the story. I was eventually transferred to Oakland Naval Hospital, which doesn't exist anymore. And 2 years after that incident, I'm walking down they were all like planked streets and overheads for rain in the Bay Area. And I saw him coming. And I'm one that I always remember faces. I rarely remember names. And I went, I know you. You were in, blah, blah, blah. And I said, what are you doing here? And he said, I'm being discharged from the Navy. He said, I'm in the neuropsychiatric ward. I'll tell you, Candace, I have never forgotten that. That young man was not treated the way, in my opinion, someone who's willing to die for their country should be treated. And the Navy failed. That's my story. I lived it.
Thank you for sharing, Hal. It is so, so unfortunate. And with that, I actually want to turn it over to Michelle if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about the ramifications on someone's mental health in a situation like that, particularly for maybe our veterans who are watching right now who might have had a similar incident and don't know where to go. What would that look like for them?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, Hal, for saying that story and for being an advocate. There needs to be more individuals like you. I had seen my share, even in this day and age, and I was in 09 through 14, racism and discrimination. And so when it comes to mental health, there is, to some it might be cliche, but it really does help to call the Veterans Crisis Line for it is very beneficial, and they're available 24/7. And I know that me personally, I've had my share of experiences. I had to retire out, because of different challenges I faced as a woman, as a veteran, and certain discriminations I had. And that line is literally what it's a lifeline. And so I recommend it. For those who are in San Diego, and there's many military individuals here, Access and Crisis Line also is, I'm talking about resources that are available within a few minutes. If you have a phone, you can call and have that privilege. I know that I'm trying to think of the name, but there is over the years, in my opinion, especially having worked at the VA for a short time, there's been some changes because of the emphasis on the fact that there wasn't enough mental health reaching veterans, mental health and wellness reaching veterans. And so since 2018, I would say that there has been an uptick in services and, caseworkers trying to help veterans. And I just want to definitely reiterate the fact that, I wouldn't dismiss. I know that there's been rumors still about the Department of Veterans Affairs, but I still would not dismiss entirely that the place as far as a place to go for veterans to seek help, to seek services, to get casework, to get life back on track, especially if you're dealing with certain ailments as a result of your military service or things that are out of your control. There's also the Stephen A. Cohen Center. Stephen A. Cohen, it's not attached to VA, but they help veterans, and that's despite their discharge status with mental health and wellness, and they're located here in San Diego also, but there are other places in the country. And they also help the families involved. And I know that there's not a lot of not as much talk, in my opinion, about how families could be impacted, because we know, just like any other person, we need a support system. And where there isn't that, and there isn't understanding, or there isn't someone guiding families to try to at least understand the plight of us veterans, there can be breakdowns and result in situations similar to what Hal was speaking of that happened to his friend.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I really appreciate that. So we're talking about discrimination. We talked a little bit about racism, and I know we briefly touched on sexism, um, but there's also a lot of homophobia that goes into that conversation we had previously about basic training and all of that. So I'd like to turn it over to Amber firstly, because I know with Shout and Stomp here at AHT, one of the things you focus on is military sexual trauma, and it seems more frequently to affect women in the military. Um, but I'd also like to pose that question to you regarding the people who maybe are in like the non-binary community, or who don't identify specifically as male or female, and how that also changes things.
Well, speaking from my standpoint as a woman, sexual harassment is something that you just deal with on the daily in the service. It's something that you just kind of, it's just, you deal with it. You don't fight against it, because otherwise you'd be fighting against it every single moment, it would seem. And military sexual trauma is what I would consider to be an epidemic in the service. And it's not just women. I mean, I think the statistic currently is 1 out of 4 women in the military have been sexual or have experienced military sexual trauma. And military sexual trauma runs the gamut from unwanted touching, unwanted words, things being spoken to you that you disagree with, sexual things, all the way to brutal rape. And I've spoken with women who have gone through all of it per the military standard, or per standards. The military sexual trauma standards, I have sustained military sexual trauma. So I would be a military sexual trauma survivor. I've never been raped, but I've still undergone different harassments just within that gamut. I mean, I know that so many other women have as well. But it's not just a woman's problem; it's a male problem as well. What kind of tends to happen um, all too often is the weakest link will be kind of focused on, like within platoons. In the military, we have that adage. Weakness is a no-no in the service. It's all about strong. If you have weakness, then you don't portray it, you don't show it. That's why mental health is such an issue, is because mental health issues are seen as weakness in the service so often. So, often the weakest link is kind of focused on, and that could be male, female, that could be LGBTQ, that could be someone non-binary. Anyone that is perceived as weak or different can often be targeted. So that's kind of part of the problem. Those are kind of some of the elements that lend to the discrimination of women, and then the discrimination of people who are different.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Amber. And Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you because I would love to get your perspective on kind of this boys' club mentality that I seem to hear a lot about in the military. And do you feel as though that boys' club mentality is getting better as far as being more inclusive and getting rid of kind of that old way of thinking? Or do you feel like we're still kind of stuck there?
Well, I could definitely, you know, bring back from my experience when I first came in. I'm used to diversity, being raised in California. So when I got stationed in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, my drill sergeants down to my roommates were all African Americans, and we got along. It
Mhm.
was more, and then you could definitely see what Hal said. There's the cliques, and you had to find the strength to get through it, and you know, don't get involved in those cliques and stand up and protect your fellow soldiers that needed you the most. And that was my role through it all. I mean, but definitely through my career, I saw that. It was like, the little clubs that they hang out together and turn their backs on fellow soldiers. We're in this together, serving our country, and this is we see it day to day from going out to eat, living our lives, going to field training exercises. It was like you couldn't believe that you're still seeing it. And I was in from '88 to 2000 or 1996, so I was in there quite a bit. And no matter what, it was still going on. But it was like you had to pick and choose, your path. And my path was I'm going to protect my friends. I had gay friends that they were so scared to let everyone know that they were, so I protected them. And I had weaker individuals that it is, like Amber said, and everyone's talking about that mental game of keeping it inside. It's affected me. This that persona and that manly, you know, thing to do really affected me. And it's like I don't recommend it for anyone, to do that long term. But yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, and it's just I could have put my blinders on and ignored it, but definitely it happened for good and bad, And it was just choose the path and help the soldiers, and that's the path I chose.
I love that. Thank you, Chris. Well, before we wrap up, I want to get final thoughts from each of you. Again, it's Veterans Appreciation Month, and these are issues that are very real for that community. And I am so happy we can highlight these issues and have these open and honest discussions because ultimately, if one person is like, that's my story and I feel good to be able to tell my story, then that makes me happy. And also, if one person finds a resource through this activity, um, that makes me feel good too. So, before we wrap it up, I'm going to go through final thoughts with each of you. I'll start with you, Amber, and then we'll go to Hal.
Final thoughts. Goodness, it is Veterans Appreciation Month. And I'm actually writing an article about what Veterans Appreciation Month means to me, what Veterans Day means to me. And as I was kind of organizing my thoughts to put them down on paper, yesterday I found out that yet another one of my veteran brothers committed suicide. And that's an issue. That's a huge issue for
Mhm.
all services. I mean, we've lost maybe 55,000 at war in combat. We've lost 100 almost 130,000 to suicide when they come home. So they make it through the war and they come home and they don't make it through the mental war. And I think that people just don't understand what the military really goes through. I mean, we come out of the military a completely different breed of human. And I think that I have an appreciation for the strength that is built within the time in service. We all build different strengths, but it does make you hard. It makes you tough.
Mhm.
Sometimes I think maybe it makes you tougher than you need to be. So, I appreciate all my fellow veterans. I appreciate all you guys so much, and I love you all so much. So, thank you all so much for being here. So,
Thanks, Amber. All right, Hal, final thoughts from you?
If there's a bright spot I know some people would listen to this, watch it, and say, "My God, why would anybody want to join the military?" But I
Right.
think one, it's a calling. Some people feel that they want to serve.
Mhm.
The other thing is that it is an opportunity for individuals to recreate themselves in a very positive way. It did for me. The optimism I have is that one, what we've seen in the past year since the murder of George Floyd is that an awful lot of young Americans are saying no more. They have to carry that into the military. And I know that brings up a huge issue of discipline. But on the other hand, what I'm seeing in my teaching at Camp Pendleton is that I see it's not a graphic difference, but I'm seeing a little difference that in the military can be very significant
Mhm.
between the people who are, and I don't get the 18, 19-year-olds, but I tend to get the 20-year-olds to 27, 28. They seem to be, I've had gay couples in the military come in my class since they have been now permitted.
Mhm.
I mean, they're not doing anything against military rules, but and they're not afraid to admit it. And I think that is a hope because what's got to happen is that some of these old cretins that are still in there, we've got to either let them retire and get out, or we've got to kick them out. And then society has to continue to push and push that our nation, if this democracy has any hope of surviving this, and it's an experiment, you all know that.
Mhm.
Basic history. This is an experiment. If it's going to succeed, the younger generation's got to do it. I'm totally committed to that. I'm an older person, but I tell my students, you're the generations that have got to do it. My generation didn't do it. We
You're
failed.
not an older person, Hal. But I agree with you there for sure. This younger generation is kicking butt and taking names, and I love it. Um, all right, so I'll go to Chris. Speaking of that younger generation, final thoughts, Chris.
My final thoughts is as veterans, I reach out to all of you to mentor the younger youth for the future, because we can't forget the past, and we truly cannot move forward to the future without embracing each other. So I challenge you to reach out, to help others, because nothing can happen without us. And thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right, last but not least, Miss Michelle.
Yes. Again, I just want to say, thank you for having me here. And then, I reflect exactly kind of some of what Christopher was saying. We stand on the on the shoulders of giants, and now that we are out and we're serving in different capacities still. I do think it's important to ensure that the future generations, those who are in the military, those who are just getting out, also are equipped and can continue to make a difference in this world, this society, because there is uh, something special about being veterans still, even with some of the disparities, the discrimination, some of the things we've seen. I don't know not one veteran who hasn't seen something or had a friend that witnessed something that was traumatic in some way, shape, or form. And so we're strong, we're resilient, and it's definitely important to pass that on.
Thank you, Michelle. And to all of our veterans out there, thank you for your service. Thank you for your continued focus and loyalty to America as a whole. I will say this as my final thought as a non military member. I'm very happy to see the repeal of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. I'm very happy to see that the military is taking military sexual trauma more seriously. We are putting women in higher positions. We are focusing on keeping everyone, no matter their color, creed, sexual orientation, etc., for doing the work and focusing on the content of their character. And ultimately, what I will say is there is still work to be done, but we'll keep doing it. So, to all of our veterans out there, thank you for everything you've done for this country, and we've got your backs. And to all of my veterans here who participated in this panel, thank you for being a part of this. This month is all about you all. Be awesome, stay awesome, do all the things you guys do in a hurrah or whatever. I'm gonna work on that.
Thank you, Candace. Thank you. And then
Thank you.
fellow female veteran.
Thank you.
Amber, Hal, Chris, Michelle, thanks so much for being here. To our audience, thank you for tuning in for another edition of American History Theater Presents, continuing the conversation. See you soon.